Welcome to another episode of SpitBallin. I'm your host, AJ. Alongside me, as always, my co-host, Christian. And on this episode of the show, we will be breaking down every team's major signings, trades, and cuts that has occurred in this free agent frenzy so far. We have only been through 1 week of free agency, but it has been very crazy, and we are here to tell you exactly what happened and our thoughts about what has happened. And remember, you can listen to SpitBallin at most places you find your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And to start off the show, last week we made some predictions about where we thought top free agents would end up. However, we were wrong on most of them. Me and Christian really did not guess any of them correctly, besides a couple, which we will break down here. We were correct about Travis Kelce heading back to Kansas City. That one was pretty obvious, but we're going to still take our small wins as we can. We were also right about Wan'Dale Robinson heading to Tennessee. It just seemed like a match made in heaven. Him heading back to being coached by Dable just made too much sense. We also got that Isaiah Likely would be headed to the Giants to team up with John Harbaugh again. And Christian himself got Jaquan Brisker to the Steelers, a pretty bold prediction that ended up turning out correct. So we will delve into the rest of these major free agent signings. But to start off the show, we're going to start with a segment called Overpaid or Underpaid, where we have 10 guys here that we will just straight up say if we believe that they were overpaid or underpaid, and then we will break down exactly why we believe these players are overpaid or underpaid when we break down what their team did in free agency. So to start, we have Daniel Jones, 2 years, $88 million. My personal opinion, that is an overpay. What do you think, Christian?
That is definitely an overpay in my book.
Yeah, and then, the Colts, they just wanted to stick with the same theme here as Alec Pierce received 4 years, $114 million, which I think it's the same theme as I believe it is an overpay. What do you think?
I like him, but it's an overpay.
And moving on, we are going to go to Kenneth Walker, heading to the Chiefs on a 3-year, $43 million deal, obviously being Super Bowl MVP and come off a great season. It's a running back at the end of the day. I believe he was overpaid.
It's another guy that I like, especially where he went, but it's another overpay. I agree.
And heading to Carolina, Jalen Phillips, 4 years, $120 million. I believe it's another overpay. I mean, he getting that type of money on his production is just crazy to me. I think it was an overpay.
Yeah, they're betting on what he could be, so it's an overpay, definitely.
And heading to New York, the Giants brought in Isaiah Likely, as we said before, on 3 years, $40 million. I believe that's an underpay. He's a young tight end with some high potential.
It's another guy they're betting on to be better than he has been, so I'm going to say underpaid.
And now we will head across the country to Los Angeles, the Rams getting Trent McDuffie and immediately extending him on a 4-year, $124 million deal. I believe that is an overpay for a slot corner.
I'm gonna say properly paid. I don't think that's it's not an underpay by any means. It's also what you need to give up and what to pay for that type of player. Trent McDuffie's special, so I believe properly paid.
And sticking with the DB theme, Jaquan Brisker, as we said, headed to the Pittsburgh Steelers on 1 year, $5.5 million. I believe that's an underpay for a guy that had a much bigger market, it seemed, heading into free agency.
Definitely an underpay. I believe he had higher suitors and he just chose the Steelers. So it's definitely an underpay.
And moving on to the wide receivers, Wan'Dale Robinson getting 4 years, $70 million, and Romeo Doubs getting 4 years, $80 million. Wan'Dale headed to the Tennessee Titans, and Romeo Doubs headed to the New England Patriots. I believe those are both massive overpays.
They're both overpays. Wan'Dale, he had 1,000 yards and 90 receptions. Not as efficient as you'd like it. Rome, he always had the shot to become the number one. Never really rose to the occasion. So they're both overpays.
And to round out the segment, we are going to end it with Rico Dowdle, who signed a 2-year, $12 million deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I believe that's an underpay for a guy that showed with the volume he could be a very good running back, and I think that's a big underpay.
Back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing years? I know it's a running back, but it's definitely an underpay.
All right, so we will jump into the exact reasons why we believe those players are overpaid and underpaid shortly, but we're going to break down each team's moves, who they re-signed, who they signed, and possible trades that they made. And we're going to break it down by division, going team by team per division. And the first division we're going to start off here is the AFC East. And we're going to be starting with the New England Patriots. The Patriots re-signed Tommy DeVito, brought in Romeo Doubs, brought in Elijah Vera Tucker, Draymond Jones, Reggie Gilliam, Kevin Byard, Jesse Luketa, KJ Britt, Julian Hill, and Mike Brown. They did not make any trades, but I would grade this offseason so far, obviously more can happen, as a solid B+. I mean, I think they brought in their needs. They, my opinion, as we just stated, Romeo Doubs, I think, they tried getting A.J. Brown. They probably lost a bidding war for Alec Pierce. And they ended up throwing a lot of money at a guy that I believe doesn't deserve the money that he got. But they needed a receiver. They addressed their needs. And I think this is a solid offseason for them. They also get Elijah Vera Tucker, who is a guard who, when he's on the field, is probably a top 10 to 15 guard in the NFL. However, just hasn't been able to stay healthy with the New York Jets. But as Jet fans know, a guy that goes from the Jets to the Patriots will most likely end up having his best season. So we'll see if that occurs. And what do you think about the other guys they signed? I think Draymond Jones and Kevin Byard are two great guys on defense. What are your opinions on the rest of the Patriots offseason?
I give the Patriots a solid B. Draymond Jones really adds more to that defensive line that was really standout this year, really helped him throughout the playoffs, helped him throughout the regular season. Kevin Byard, did not expect him to go to the Patriots. I expected him back in Chicago. It's big for them. They're very young. They need people back there who can show the younger guys what it means to win. Kevin Byard's won a lot, not playoff success, but he's been around a long time. Romeo Doubs, it's one of the only guys they actually could have gotten. It's just they tried very hard for A.J. Brown, and it's just they could make something happen as we're recording this now. But like we said, it's an overpay. You have to take it with a grain of salt, though. Just because we're saying someone's overpaid, I'm not saying by any means that they're a bad player, but it's just, they're solid B, though. It's solid offseason for the Patriots so far.
Yeah, I mean, we're both giving them, I gave a B+, you gave a B. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, for me, I think exactly. It's a team that, they're just in the Super Bowl. They really did not have to go out and do a lot. Obviously, we spoke about it in the last episode of the podcast. They did get rid of Stephon Diggs. They bring in a guy like Romeo Doubs, though, who I think is a solid replacement. They have Kayshon Boutte already on the roster. But I think they paid a guy that they just needed to get a receiver. And if he went off the market, they really were just kind of left with nothing. And then, it's a team, as I just said, they were in the Super Bowl. They really didn't have to do much. And, you got to hope that Drake May is going to not be what everybody was saying he was at the end of the season, a guy that benefited from an easy schedule. Hope that he could still play up to MVP caliber now, getting, as winning his division, the Patriots will have that number one division winner schedule this year. So it's going to be a tougher schedule than they had last year, and we'll see if they're able to survive it. And moving on to the team that, typically wins that division, the Buffalo Bills, obviously a lot of noise to end the season, obviously losing their head coach. Sean McDermott hiring Joe Brady, the OC, now as the head coach. They bring back Connor McGovern, Dawson Knox, Mitch Winowski, Ryan Van Denmark, and they bring in a lot of guys that I think will be helping them. They bring in Bradley Chubb, D. Alford, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Kyle Allen, and Geno Stone. And then obviously they made the one trade they did trade away Teron Johnson, but we will be discussing only trades for teams when they acquired somebody, not when they gave up somebody. So, for example, we were talking about DJ Moore here for the Buffalo Bills. We will not mention him about the Bears, giving him up. I think this is, I'd give them a C. I mean, I could honestly even go down maybe to a C-. I mean, you traded a second-round pick for DJ Moore. That's a lot. And, obviously we'll get to the Steelers later. The Steelers got Michael Pittman for a late-round swap. So I think they gave up a little bit too much for DJ Moore, but you address the need. Obviously, we know how their season ended. It was with Brandon Cooks losing the ball and it ending up in Jaquan McMillan's hands and ending their season ultimately and getting their head coach fired because of that. So you really addressed the number one need. Josh Allen needed a receiver like DJ Moore. I think it's a great receiver to be on that team. But, I mean, I just don't think they did enough. I mean, you get Bradley Chubb, who's really just past his prime at this point. Gardner Johnson, you never know if he's going to play well or be a locker room cancer. And Geno Stone, I mean, the worst defense in the NFL just cut him, the Cincinnati Bengals. And now, as Buffalo Bills, you're going to bring him in. Obviously, it's hard to be a good safety on a bad team, but I just think same thing. He's kind of past his prime. What do you think, Christian? I'd sit here on a C, C minus.
I agree with the C range. Getting back Connor McGovern on the team-friendly deal that he took was huge for them. He really wants to stay in Buffalo. They really want to keep him there. Bradley Chubb, much needed edge help alongside Greg Rousseau. They're probably going to lose Epinesa, who also didn't play as great. But D. Alford, they needed a slot guy. They lost Taron Johnson. We'll see if it works out. CJ Gardner Johnson and Geno Stone. They lost Darnell Savage. They're probably going to lose Taylor Rapp. They just need guys that can fill in. I don't think those guys are going to be major game changers. Geno Stone was a game changer for Baltimore. And then he ended up going to Cincy. Wasn't as good because Cincy's defense was very bad. And like you said, they addressed their biggest need, DJ Moore. They needed a receiver. Needed a receiver bad. Addressed it with DJ Moore. The rest of the team should pan out fine. I trust Joe Brady. Yeah, solid C though. It wasn't anything special.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a C rating where we're saying they had oh, these are terrible signings in a sense. It wasn't, for a team like the Bills that have my opinion, MVP candidate every single year in Josh Allen, you just didn't do enough, my opinion, for him. And obviously, he's getting up there where, you don't want to waste his prime is how that's why I kind of bring it down to a C. But exactly, they address their needs, and I think, we're going to have to see how this pans out. Obviously, something else could happen before the draft, and even in the draft, they could have, finished addressing their needs, but we are obviously just going off of what has happened so far in free agency. And now moving on to a team in the division that was pretty active, the Miami Dolphins. They bring back Greg Dulcich, Willie Gay, Darrell Baker, and A.J. Green III. And obviously the big news with the Dolphins, they cut Tua, and they brought in Malik Willis. I think that's a big move, and we're going to see how that pans out. Alongside Malik Willis, they brought in Zane Gonzalez, Josh Uche, Lonnie Johnson Jr., Zane Anderson, Ben Sims, Alex Austin, Robert Beal Jr., Jamari Saylor, Seth Vernon, David Ojabo, and Jalen Tolbert. I'd actually give them, I don't want to give them a B just because I don't think this is B's right under an A. So I think that's, you had a almost great offseason, but I would give them a B minus just because I don't think it was a B. I don't think it was a C though. I think it's slightly above a C. Where, Malik Willis, I actually do believe will be good for the Dolphins. I think this is a breath of fresh air to get out of the Tua era. Obviously, they took a major dead cap hit with it, but you're going to get a young guy that I believe, he was in Tennessee with a bad coaching staff. Then obviously when he was with a good coaching staff in Green Bay as a backup, he shined. And I think with the right coaches, Malik Willis could shine again in Miami. He's got the weapons with Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane around him. And, I think bringing in a guy like Jalen Tolbert is also a good guy to have next to Jalen Waddle. We'll see if they address receiver a little bit more. They have Malik Washington already. So I don't think that's a horrible wide receiving core. And then, my opinion, I think the most under the radar signing that they got here is David Ojabo. I think David Ojabo coming out of Michigan, now around 4 years ago, was touted as, a first round pick. Obviously, he had the injury at his pro day, which has completely derailed his career. But, in a scheme with Jeff Hafley as the head coach, I think he's a guy that could really shine and have a career revival, almost like, Kayvon Chason did with the New England Patriots this past season. So I'm going to stick with, a B minus. What do you think, Christian? I think that's a fair rating for them, and I'd love, to hear what you think.
I believe it's fair. I'm going to give it a C, though. The Dolphins are kind of just entering this new era. They're letting go of a lot of guys. They're bringing in a lot of guys that can compete. Like you said, David Ojabo definitely could compete. Coming out of college, was a first rounder or was projected first rounder. Malik Willis, he played very well the 2 games he started. I actually really like this signing. I predicted that he was going to go to the Dolphins. Zane Gonzalez, they're bringing in. It's a rough time for them. They're losing Bradley Chubb. Bradley Chubb wasn't the biggest performer past 2 years. Tyreek Hill obviously didn't work out the way they wanted to with Tua. They lost Minka. They lost Liam Eichenberg. They're going to lose Rasul Douglas. They're going into a new era. Only time will tell if Malik Willis can actually be the guy. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a very Justin Fields-esque type of exactly will Malik Willis be the guy season as, if he isn't, it could end up in him being cut the next year. That's the way the contract's structured. And yes, I think it's going to be a big year for Malik Willis to, prove to the Dolphins that he could be their guy after Tua. And sticking with, you talking about Minka and me bringing up Justin Fields, we are going to round out the AFC East with the New York Jets. Myself and Christian have debated this before hopping on to record this episode. I personally give the Jets from a front office perspective. I know Jet fans listening are not going to agree with this, but I give them an A+. I think as a front office, you have to look at, not from the fan perspective, you re-signed Breece Hall in the franchise tag, so you did, what you should have. You brought back Mikal Walker, Max Mitchell, Juwan Briggs, McCrary Ball, who was one of your captains, Chimanka Okafor, Jelani Woods, Xavier Newman, and Keeney Nwagu, and Andre Sisco. You bring in Joseph Asai, Demario Davis, Dylan Parham, David Onyemata, Kingsley Engbare, Dane Belton, Nashawn Wright, Andrew Beck, Cade York, and they obviously made the big headline trades for Minkah Fitzpatrick, where they only had to give up a 7th-round pick for him, and Geno Smith, where they only had to give up a 6th-round pick. From a front office perspective, I give this an A+, just because you're bringing in 2 veteran guys in your defense like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Demario Davis, that if you're drafting a young safety, or, they currently have young safety, Malachi Moore already on their team, and Demario Davis coming in, for McCrary Ball. Jelani Sherwood obviously was not able to stay healthy that much this year, but, we'll see how he is this year. I think those are just 2 guys, though, that can mentor their position groups and really, mold them into hopefully future leaders of this Jets team and really into better players as well. And I think the Geno Smith trade was just great for the Jets. It's, it's something that's going to, sell tickets in a sense. They're bringing back Geno Smith. He's back in New York after all these years, and he's had success elsewhere. So it's something to, sadly, I guess, be excited about, because I know several Jet fans aren't. But I think it's a guy, you look what he just did with the Raiders. He was so bad, they got the number 1 overall pick. But then with Seattle, they were good enough where they made the playoffs, and at least in the last year, were in contention for the playoffs. So his ceiling is you could possibly make the playoffs, or as most Jet fans want, you might end up with that number 1 overall pick heading into the 2027 NFL draft. So my opinion, from a front office perspective, I think it's an A+. From a fan perspective that wants to see wins now, I would say an F. Yeah, I mean, you really just became a retirement home and are going to have another kind of year. I also really don't understand, though, moving on from Nick Folk. He was one of the best kickers in the league last year. And you bring in Cade York, who's been very shaky and hasn't been a great kicker. I guess it's youth movement at the position, though. You're bringing a much younger guy. And I think Nashawn Wright, though, was a good signing. He shined in his couple key moments for the Bears last year. But so, as I said, I think it's an A+ from a front office perspective. It gives you a ceiling of maybe you'll win 7 games, or, you're going to get the number 1 overall pick and be able to choose your quarterback and really start, your vision, going into 2027. What do you think, Christian?
I'll give them a B-. I'm higher on them now than I was. You kind of swayed me a little bit. They brought in a lot of veterans. They brought in a lot of guys who have played a lot of football. And like you said, Demario Davis, David Onyemata, Joseph Osai, a lot of football being played from those guys. And the Jets need guys who know how to win. I'm not saying those guys have won explicitly. Demario Davis was successful in New Orleans up until a few years ago. They bring in a guy like Nashawn Wright, who you're high on. I'm not that high on him. I didn't believe he had that great of a year last year. He kind of had a Trayvon Diggs type year where he stuffed the stat sheet. Unfortunately for corners, when you stuff the stat sheet, it's not that big of an achievement compared to other positions. But getting Minkah, it's huge for the secondary, helps them out. Geno Smith, I don't like it, but like you said, I understand why the front office did it. He was their best chance to win now, or at least win a few games, like you said, win a few games, draft a quarterback, wait till next year to get a quarterback. It's definitely not as bad as I thought it was a few days ago, but I'll give them a B-.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair grade. Obviously, I graded a little higher, but yeah, I mean, it's a team that just, they're going to be the same old Jets. Is really what it looks like. And we'll move on to a division that is not like the same old Jets. They have a competitor in 3 teams every year. The AFC North, a lot of stuff happening in that division. We are going to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They brought back Cole Holcomb, Asante Samuel. They restructured Cam Hayward to free up some cap and also extend him by a year. They also brought back Ezi Atomewo and Jack Driscoll, and they signed Rico Dowdle, Jamel Dean, Darnell Savage, Cameron Johnston, Jaquan Brisker, and Sebastian Joseph Day. They also made the trade that made headlines for Michael Pittman, which was they acquired a 7th-round pick and gave up a 6th-round pick. Obviously, the huge question mark for this team is the quarterback position. They do all this, but who will be throwing Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf the ball? We still don't know if it's Aaron Rodgers. I grade this offseason so far as an A. If it's even Will Howard, I would still say an A. I think I'm not going to give the Steelers an A plus just because it's hard for my opinion, a team to get an A plus. And I also just believe, they've done great moves, but I would, the quarterback position is still a major question mark, and they haven't really even given any clarity to fans out there to, know who their quarterback's going to be. But I would say an A because, you bring back Asante Samuel, who was a guy that a lot of teams wanted last year coming off of his injury, and he had a pretty solid stint with the Steelers, and he's young, and now you have a room of Joey Porter Jr. and Asante Samuel, and I think that's just a solid corner room now, and you're bringing in a veteran presence of Jamel Dean to join that room. I think that's a great corner room for the Steelers. Heading to the draft, they could obviously draft another one, but so far I think they've really addressed, their number one need on defense, which was the corner room to get fixed, and I think bringing in Jaquan Brisker as well to round out their DBs at strong safety. I mean, as we said, we both believe he was underpaid at 1 year, $5 million. That's just, I think a guy that if he comes in and balls out, could end up with a second contract with the Steelers. If not, hits free agency again and goes elsewhere. But for this year, he's a Pittsburgh Steeler, and next to Jalen Ramsey, this is one of the best DB cores, I believe, in the league. And the Steelers obviously losing Kenneth Gainwell to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They replace him with Rico Dowdle, though, who is a younger version of him, basically, and kind of plays that same role. So I think, and then the obvious biggest need for this team, besides quarterback, was that number 2 wide receiver, and they bring in Michael Pittman. We all believe that they could still address that in the draft, but I really think this was a very good offseason so far for the Steelers, and it's far from over. So, what do you think, Christian? I'd give him an A, though, so far.
I'm very close with you. I'm giving him an A minus. Reasons because Rico Dowdle, I think very underrated signing. I was upset they lost Kenneth Gainwell. He actually had a very good year last year. What he brought to the table as a receiving back. Rico Dowdle's not as good of a receiving back, but as a running back too, very good for Steelers. And he could even compete with Jalen Warren for running back 1 spot. Secondary, obviously Jamel Dean, not the player he once was, but he's still a very, very solid corner. Definitely a big upgrade for that defense. Jaquan Brisker, this guy's a stud. The fact that they were able to get him for $5 million, went back to his hometown, Pittsburgh, definitely for a lower price than other teams probably offered him. And Michael Pittman, like you said, wide receiver 2, I believe he slots as wide receiver 1. I believe DK Metcalf, I think we said it last spot, or maybe we didn't. He doesn't have the tools to be a wide receiver 1, which was weird when they just had him last year and just Calvin Austin, because the offense looked very stagnant at times. Bringing in a guy like Michael Pittman can completely change that. He could run on all 3 routes of the field. He could run deep, he could run short, run middle, and they didn't give up much for him. But this is only because injury bugs have bugged him a lot. So it is a risk in that sense. But overall, really good offseason from the Steelers so far.
Yeah, and, moving on now to their interdivision rival, the Baltimore Ravens. They've had a whirlwind of an offseason. Obviously, last episode we spoke about the Maxx Crosby trade, obviously them giving up their first-round pick this year, which is in the top 15, and their first-round pick next year. That has not occurred, and we'll get into that in a second. But what they did do, they re-signed Tyler Huntley, Chidobe Awuzie, Dayton Wade, and they brought in Jonathan Gwynn, who could be the center replacement for Tyler Linderbaum. We'll see. Durham Smythe, Trey Hendrickson, and John Simpson. John Simpson once was a Raven. He comes back now after a stint with the Jets. I'd grade their offseason as a C. I don't think they've done enough to help Lamar Jackson on the offensive side of the ball. You kind of just lost Isaiah Likely, lost his starting center, and you also just, really, Rashad Bateman is solid. Has he really been able to prove himself that he is a reliable option after Zay Flowers? Not really. I guess it's going to still be Mark Andrews, but, he also has shown that he is regressing. And yeah, I just don't think they did enough even on the defensive side of the ball. Chidobe Awuzie was the reason that their season ended last year, and they bring him back. So I don't know. And then obviously Trey Hendrickson was their biggest signing. And I definitely think, I'm grading this also with the, they're going to live with that stigma as long as DaCosta remains their GM. What they did to the Raiders, I think, was just completely unethical. And it's going to be very difficult to see them make a trade, I believe, as he stays as their GM. I don't think they will be able to make many trades with him as their GM. And we'll see what that means for his career. Yeah, they lost Maxx Crosby. Obviously, they failed him on his physical. But it's very odd in the sense that everybody knew what was wrong with him, and that's what they failed him on. So just very interesting. And it was just sneaky that they, rumors were that they were on the phones with Trey Hendrickson to sign him while Crosby was in the building still. So it's very shady business going on in Baltimore. That's where I'm going to stay at my grade. And what do you think, Christian? I think it was a very interesting offseason for a team that was touted as a major winner, kind of became a very interesting story. And Trey Hendrickson is still, a great Crosby replacement, I guess you could say, even though they never even had him. But I just don't think he is the same type of player as Maxx Crosby.
I give the Ravens a C. This is solely because of Trey Hendrickson. I believe Trey Hendrickson is an elite edge rusher. He's been an elite edge rusher since his last year in New Orleans. Went to Cincy, was elite there on a very, very bad defense. But like you said, very shady by the Ravens. They didn't really have to do anything once they traded for Maxx Crosby. Their offseason was kind of complete. And then that happened, and they had to, pivot towards Trey Hendrickson. Very weird situation. Like you said, very unethical. But other than that, they didn't really do much. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They were very injured last year on offense and defense. So I expect the defense to be better this year, especially with Trey Hendrickson. That's still a huge boost. He's up there with Maxx Crosby, I believe. Very close in skill sets. And bringing back John Simpson, much needed help in the interior line, which they've struggled at the past few years. But yeah, see.
Yeah, that's something we will disagree on, though, until I guess we see him in a Ravens uniform. I don't think Trey Hendrickson has, I think the best ball is behind him, but we'll see what he could do in Baltimore. And moving on to his former team, Cincinnati Bengals, I don't want to give a team an F, but I'll give them a D- because they re-signed Dalton Risner, which he's actually a pretty solid guard, so I think retaining him was big. Josh Johnson, I feel like, is at this point, we're trying to see how many teams he could play on. Jonathan Allen, they bring in alongside Boye Mafe and Brian Cook. I give them D- for those three signings. I think those are huge boosts to the defense. Jonathan Allen, his best football is definitely behind him, I think. Definitely did not have a great year with the Minnesota Vikings last year. But Boye Mafe and Brian Cook are two young pieces. They lost Geno Stone. They bring in Brian Cook now alongside Jordan Battle. I think that's a young, great safety duo. And Boye Mafe was a solid, linebacker for the Seahawks, was kind of overshadowed by their whole defense. But I think somewhere, in Cincy, like a place like that, he could shine. But I'd give them a D-. This was there's not really not much to talk about that. Their offseason, they made 5 signings. What do you believe in their offseason, Christian?
I'll give them a D+. I do really like some of the signings. Jonathan Allen, I don't believe his best football is behind them. For some reason, when D linemen, specifically defensive tackles, go to Minnesota, for some reason, elite guys, Jonathan Allen was elite on Washington. Minnesota gets him, he just falls off. Same thing with Javon Hargrave. He was elite on the Eagles. He was elite on the Niners. He goes to Minnesota, completely falls off. I believe Jonathan Allen still has some left in the tank. Boye Mafe, like we said, I don't know if we said it before, but I believe it's an overpay. I don't think enough production. Obviously, Super Bowl winner. I just don't believe enough production for what they gave him. Brian Cook has been very good for the Chiefs, and I was surprised the Chiefs let him walk. Obviously, Bengals paid him, so D+. I do like Brian Cook and Jonathan Allen, though.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on the Jonathan Allen point. Yeah, I'm just really saying I think the best football is behind him because of just age purely. No, I agree. Yeah, Minnesota is a very weird thing with Brian Flores' scheme, just really does not let defensive tackles kind of capitalize. So I agree that he could maybe have a resurgence type season with the Bengals, which would be pretty cool to see, as I do like him as a player. And yeah, Brian Cook is a great signing for them. As I said, that's a great little safety duo they got back there now. And moving on to the last team of the division, the Cleveland Browns. They bring back Ronnie Hickman, Tevin Jenkins, Trey Avery, Corey Bacores, D'Angelo Ross as well. And their signings were Zion Johnson, Quincy Williams, Elton Jenkins, Jack Stoll, and Kyla Davis, if I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Apologies if I did not. And they did make a trade, though, as well for Titus Howard, and they gave up a 5th-round pick to Houston for that. I actually would give the Browns a B. I think it's a team that there's really not much to be excited about, as, it's just a team that you really just have to see how they play. And with the new head coach, obviously, and Todd Monken not having such a great rep in Baltimore as an OC, it's an interesting team going into the year, but I think they address their needs, as we've said about teams before. You bring back Tevin Jenkins, you bring in Zion Johnson, you lost Devin Bush, brought in Quincy Williams to replace him, bring in Elton Jenkins, who is a huge veteran presence now to have on that line. you protected your quarterback, which I think is a number one thing you have to do on offense if you want to be a good offense. Because if your quarterback has no time, he can't use his weapons. So I'd give them a B just because they replaced what they lost, and they also brought in pieces that they needed. And Titus Howard, Zion Johnson, Elton Jenkins, those are all just guys now that are just they lost their entire O-line in free agency. They were able to bring back Tevin Jenkins, but all their O-linemen were free agents heading into the free agency window, and brought in a bunch of new ones that I believe could be solid. I do believe Zion Johnson, though, was a slight overpay just because of his production in LA. But I think, it's a solid B. They adjust their needs, and I would say for a team like the Browns, who you don't really know what's going to happen, that's the number one priority to do. What do you believe they could have done better, or how do you think they did do, Christian?
I'll give them a C plus on the higher end, around C plus and B minus. They kind of just retooled their O-line in one offseason. They lost what they've had for the last decade, really, in Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, Jack Conklin was there for a while. All those players heavily have regressed the past few years. They re-signed Tevin Jenkins, who played well last year, so he's obviously staying. Zion Johnson, like you said, hasn't really been that type of player for the Chargers. Still a good guard, obviously. Still an overpay for agency. If you want your guys, you got to overpay. Bringing in Quincy, a veteran, replacing Devin Bush. Still a downgrade. Devin Bush played very well last year. Elton Jenkins, an elite guard and tackle, struggled at center last year. So it's interesting where they're going to put him. Probably at center, even though he did struggle. And Titus Howard could play tackle, could play guard. Probably going to play right tackle, taking Jack Conklin's spot. But I'll give it a C plus. They kind of just retooled what they lost. So I don't think they got much better, but they are better for it, I will say.
Yeah, and I completely agree. It's a team exactly, and that just kind of retooled. And it is going to be interesting with their O-line, though. I feel like throwing a bunch of guys that never played with each other at all on one O-line is going to be interesting. But we're going to head to the AFC South, and to start off, the Jacksonville Jaguars did a whole lot of nothing so far in free agency. They bring back Dennis Gardeck and Monteric Brown alongside Quinnen Morris, and they bring in Chris Rodriguez. I mean, it's a team that was successful last year. I think there's a lot of rumors about them trading Brian Thomas Jr. We'll see if that ever happens. We've been hearing it since the trade deadline, last season. But I'd give them I don't think they deserve below a C, so I'll just give them a C. It's kind of just, they really don't have to do much. I think they have a great team. They made a playoff run last year, obviously lost in the wild card to the Bills. But I think it's a good team that, obviously they did lose Travis Etienne. I think they're very much believing in Bishal Tuden and, Quint Allen, and now you bring in Chris Rodriguez. But Monteric Brown, a very under-the-radar DB, though, I think that was actually a huge I'm actually moving up to a C+ for that, because I think it's a guy that not a lot of people know about, and he will be getting a lot more playing time this year, obviously with them losing Greg Newsome. But I think it's a guy that, that was an important re-signing, and that's what they did. They made sure they got their guys back that they wanted. But actually, I'm going to actually move them down to a C- now, because I do realize they lost Devin Lloyd, which is a pretty big loss for them. But I think C- is a fair grade. What do you think, Christian, about the Jaguars offseason so far?
Very weird to grade them. They haven't really done much. They lost a lot, which is why I'm going to give them a D+. They lost a lot. ETN, I still believe, could have been a very good running back for them. I feel like they could have got him for a shortened price as well. But they also lost Devin Lloyd, who was all-pro level linebacker last year. Very good. Bringing in Chris Rodriguez, though, he could be a good 1B to Bishal Tuten. But like you said, Buster Brown, one of the big reasons why they were okay with letting Greg Newsome walk, Buster Brown really showed up last year. They were kind of in committee with each other, him and Greg Newsome, and he kind of outplayed Greg Newsome for the most part, which is why they re-signed him like Greg Newsome walk. But I very agree. Buster Brown, very low-key player a lot of people don't know about, but they probably will know next year. But they didn't do enough for me. So D+, I believe I said D+. Yeah, they didn't do enough for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you at a C-. It's just an offseason that they haven't done much so far. And, Buster Brown, though, I think it's going to be, I like the use of the nickname there. It's going to be a breakout season for that guy. So I think that was a huge re-signing for them. But exactly, they just kind of lost too much to give them a higher grade. And moving on to their division rival in the Texans, as those have been the two most competitive teams these last couple years in that division. They bring back Danielle Hunter, Ed Ingram, Kaimi Fairbairn, Dalton Schultz, Sheldon Rankins, Trent Brown, Naquan Jones, and MJ Stewart. They bring in Reed Blankenship, Braden Smith, Logan Hall, Dominique Robinson, Jake Hummel, Foster Moreau, and as of today, Evan Brown. They also made the big trade for David Montgomery where they gave up a 4th-round pick and Juice Scruggs. And we saw a punter trade here by the Texans where they gave up a late-round pick swap to the Saints for Kai Kroger. I give them a solid B. I don't really want to go above a B. I think it's a team that, they address their needs and where now Reed Blankenship is going to, Jimmy Ward, obviously a lot of off-field issues. They bring in Reed Blankenship, who's going to take over that role now that Jimmy Ward was playing for the Texans. And I mean, you have one of the best, just young, my opinion, great DB rooms now in the NFL. Reed Blankenship's going to be playing alongside Jalen Petrie, Kamari Lassiter, and Derek Stingley now. I mean, that's just a lockdown, no-fly zone I feel like we're going to see this year. So we're going to see how that goes. And I think Dave Montgomery is a great trade for them. Obviously, with the cut of Joe Mixon, they were not going to give Woody Marks the keys. Obviously, we saw last year they didn't really even give him the keys. Nick Chubb was still heavily involved even after Woody Marks, I think, proved he should have been the lead back. So I think Dave Montgomery is a great guy to bring in, a guy that has complained about his usage the last year and wants to be that number 1 running back again. So I'd say a B. I don't want to go higher just because they did not bring in anything that's like, wow, this is going to bring their team to another level. But I really do believe this is a solid offseason for a team that was good last year. They were already good. They made the playoffs. They made it to the divisional round. We'll see if C.J. Stroud can get past the divisional round next year if they are in that same situation again. But, what do you think, Christian? I think this is a solid offseason for a team that, was good, and they brought in guys that could help them be better.
I was thinking C+, but now I'm more so B-. David Montgomery, I think, is a big pickup for them. They need to be able to run the football. Very inefficient last year with all their backs. This should help them a lot, especially Woody Marks. I believe Woody Marks will be better in a committee than a straight-up power back role, straight-up 20 carries a game. I believe David Montgomery helps them in that sense, especially offense-wise, because I don't know if there's any Texans lovers out there. I'm not a big C.J. Stroud guy, so I believe they need to put the ball on the ground a lot more in order for their offense to produce, because their defense, like you said, one of the best secondaries in football. Reed Blankenship is adding to that. Wasn't as good last year on the Eagles, which is why the Eagles were perfectly fine letting him walk. But still a good addition. Braden Smith, much needed right tackle help. Trading Titus Howard, who did play guard as well last year. Logan Hall, much needed defensive tackle help. They did struggle with injuries down the line last year. They did also give Kaimi Fairbairn, highest paid kicker in NFL history. Shout out to Kaimi Fairbairn. He was really good last year. But yeah, B-. They addressed needs. David Montgomery definitely being the biggest one.
Yeah, and I mean, exactly what you just said. I think Woody Marks is going to benefit from being in a type of committee. We might see if it's like a Sonic and Knuckles type committee that, Dave Montgomery was a part of in Detroit. Obviously, Woody Marks not as good as Jahmyr Gibbs, but we will see, how this backfield works. And as you said, if there are any CJ Stroud lovers listening, I think it is very big to keep the ball on the ground for that team as well, just because they easily, in my opinion, could have gotten past the divisional round if he did not turn over the ball 4 times. But they did not have a dependent ground game in that game, so we'll see if that changed this year. And moving on to a team that we thought was going to win that division last year, but obviously with Daniel Jones tearing his Achilles, correct me if I'm wrong there, Christian, but, I think they had my opinion before you even read it. I'll give you the grade. I'm giving them a D. I think, they brought back their guys. They bring back Alec Pierce, Daniel Jones, Blake Grupe, Laquan Treadwell, Drew Ogletree. They bring in Arden Key, Michael Clemens, Derek Nanandi, and Jonathan Owens. And they trade for Kobe Wooden and giving up a, captain of their defense, Zaire Franklin. I just grade this a D as I think they threw a lot of money at stuff that I don't think will help them that much. Alec Pierce, as we said before, I believe was an overpay. As I said last episode, I, think he's a one-trick pony. I think he is purely just a guy that is going to be a deep threat. Now, will I say I think him staying in Indianapolis will benefit him? Yes, because it's going to be the same system, same plays for the most part, where he'll be able to maybe shine a little bit more without Michael Pittman being there. But I just don't think they should have paid him that much. And Daniel Jones, I mean, it's a contract where, as I said before, 2 years, $88 million. It's a contract where you can get out of it after a year. There's an opt-out, basically. This is the way it's structured. But, I mean, it's just, $60 million is guaranteed of that contract. It is just way too much for a quarterback that, wasn't that good, obviously, on the Giants, came to Indianapolis, played well, and then actually, a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but before he even got injured, saw a slight decline, and I think it started in that Pittsburgh Steelers game where I think he turned over the ball 4 times, and I just think it's a lot of money to give a guy like Daniel Jones, and you're really just betting on kind of capturing that lightning in a bottle that you had last year, and I just don't think you're going to have it again. And we'll see what they do. I think getting rid of Zaire Franklin was good. That clearly was a growing kind of issue in their franchise. But yeah, I'm going to stick with that grade just because I think they kind of threw money at what they think they should have, but I don't think they really should have done any of that. And they should have just been kind of happy with maybe losing Daniel Jones even, because the money he was demanding is just outrageous, in my opinion. What do you believe they should have done different, Christian?
I'm giving them a D plus. It's tricky situation. Their offseason, especially the draft's going to be difficult. Obviously, traded away 2 firsts for Sauce Gardner, which at the time I believe made no sense, and I still believe it makes no sense. Alec Pierce, like I said before, he's overpaid. I don't believe he is a one-trick pony. I believe he's a very good receiver. Yards after catch, yards down the field, very good. He's been good since Cincinnati. Hasn't had the chance to show it because Indy has weapons now. Getting rid of Michael Pittman, I believe, will help them in the future. Tyler Warren is now going to be that second guy. But yeah, D plus. They didn't do enough, and Daniel Jones, massive overpay.
Yeah, and staying in their division, moving on to the last team of their division, the Tennessee Titans. We talked a lot about them heading into free agency. They bring back Joey Sly, Morgan Cox, Jarek Reed, CJ Ravenel, Garrett Dellinger, and they did restructure Calvin Ridley to keep him in Tennessee on a cheaper deal. They bring in Wan'Dale Robinson, John Franklin Myers, Alante Taylor, Cordell Flott, Daniel Bellinger, Jacob Martin, Austin Schlottman, Jordan Elliott, Tommy Townsend, Cordell Volson, Mitch Trubisky, Josh Williams, Bryce Oliver, Mark Herring, Kylan Granson, Malik Herring, and Tony Adams, and they also traded for Solomon Thomas. This is a team I'd give them a C just because they had money and wow, they spent it. I don't think they needed to sign all of these guys. I think they had to address a receiver problem, which they did with Wan'Dale Robinson, even if, we believe he was overpaid. As Christian has said so far, you got to pay those guys that type of money to get them. It's a bidding war at the end of the day. But, I also really believe that they kind of became the Tennessee Giants and Jets. They brought in every player that Brian Dable or Robert Saleh has coached for the most part. And those are guys that got both those coaches fired. So I'm going to stick at that grade just because it's a very interesting offseason, and we'll see if these guys could, do better now in a different place in Tennessee. What do you think, Christian?
I'm going to give them a C plus. Could have been better. They fit a lot of needs. Unfortunately, they paid a lot of guys a lot of money, which sometimes doesn't really work out. Wan'Dale, I believe, is an overpay. He is a good receiver, not for the money they're giving. They're giving him wide receiver 1 money. John Franklin Myers, very good defensive tackle. Robert Saleh loves him. Alante Taylor, Cordell Flott, obviously big additions to the secondary. A little overpay on Flott, in my opinion. Very small corner. He is 6'2", very slim though. Bellinger believes in overpay. That's specifically for Brian Dable. And then everyone else, it's just they spent a lot of money. We'll see if it works out. Normally it doesn't. So yeah, C plus.
Yeah, now moving on to the AFC West and to a team that has done pretty much the complete opposite of the Titans, the Denver Broncos. They bring back J.K. Dobbins, and I think that was something that was surprising to most people. They bring back Justin Sternard, Adam Trotman, Alex Singleton, Sam Ellinger, Adam Prentice, and a little Jordan Humphrey. They have not signed anybody outside of their organization. They have only re-signed people. They haven't even made a trade. So I'm not going to grade them, to be honest, even though we can grade everybody else. I feel like I can't. It's a team that was a Bo Nix injury away from possibly winning a Super Bowl, because I think they would have been there, and we don't know what they would have done there. I think bringing back J.K. Dobbins, though, does show that they do not believe in R.J. Harvey as a running back 1. I believe maybe we'll see more of a committee, though, to keep J.K. Dobbins healthy, as he did go down with another injury, which has just been kind of a stigma with him his entire career, that he cannot stay healthy for a full season. So I do think R.J. Harvey will be involved to keep him healthy, but I think it's going to be mainly J.K. Dobbins again, as he was very good before he got hurt, and obviously they clearly do not believe in R.J. Harvey. So I guess if I have to grade them, I just give them a C, because it's not a bad offseason, not a great offseason, though, as they really haven't done much.
Another team, it's hard to grade. I'll give them a C minus. It's unfair to other teams, but JK, much needed. I thought they were going to go after Kenneth Walker. I think the Chiefs just got to him too quickly. Bring back J.K. Dobbins. Sean Payton loves his running back guy committees. It's not really a committee, though. They're both 1A, 1B. They both do a lot for their teams. Justin Strnad, very solid linebacker they wanted to bring back. Homegrown guy. Trotman, homegrown. Alex Singleton, love him. Captain of that defense. Didn't do enough, though, so C-. We'll see what they do in the draft, though.
Yeah, I think it'll be a team that, exactly, we'll see what they do in the draft. And moving on to the Chargers, they bring back Tyler Tart, Trey Pipkins, Delshon Phillips, Khalil Mack, Trevor Penning, Dean Leonard, Denzel Perryman, Kamani Vidal, Jarrett Patterson, and Kendall Williamson. And then bring in Tyler Biadasz, Charlie Kohler, Keaton Mitchell, Cole Strange, Alec Ingle, and Dalvin Tomlinson. I think it's a C-. I think Tyler Biadasz is what's really keeping them, I think, above a D. For me personally, I think that's a great signing. It's a O-line that obviously was injured last year, with their 2 tackles being all pro type tackles. Didn't play though. But I think Tyler Biadasz addressed a huge need, that they did not have a good center last year, even, with Bradley Bozeman being their starting center was just not good at all. And I think Tyler Biadasz is going to be a huge addition for them. But besides that, they really didn't bring in anybody I think that makes them that much better. I mean, Keaton Mitchell is interesting because, that could be a committee type backfield now, him and Amari Hampton. They did not bring back Najee Harris. So, Keaton Mitchell's a guy that just hasn't, been able to stay healthy as well. And also, just has always been behind Derrick Henry. So we'll see what he can do. And Cole Strange, a guy that, I think is going to be O-line depth for them. He did not work out in New England. And, a fullback and a tough tight end in Charlie Kohler and Alec Ingle were brought in. That's just a typical Jim Harbaugh signing. But I don't think it really makes them that much better. What do you think they could have done better or should do to, be better? I don't think, this is a team that really had to, I think, do something bigger, and they just didn't do it.
C- in my book. Tyler Biadasz, it's a big addition. It's a huge upgrade over Bozeman, but Biadasz has struggled the past few years since leaving Dallas. I believe they're going to go guard heavy in the draft because their O-line should be much better with their 2 all-pro tackles back. Yeah, it's C-. I mean, they brought back most of their guys. And they kind of just got depth. That's the most thing they got. Cole Strange, interesting, hasn't been good for the Patriots. So,
yeah, and moving on to the team that typically dominates this division, the Kansas City Chiefs. They bring back Tyquan Thornton and Travis Kelce, and they bring in Kenneth Walker, Alohi Gilman, Chris Tonga, Amar DeMarcado, and Kaidir Kohu. Obviously losing Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson, both to the Rams, which is pretty interesting. I think, Kaidir Kohu was a great addition. He hasn't really worked out that well in Miami, but I think it's a guy that Steve Spagnuolo could mold and could hopefully help that defense after they lost a lot at that position. Alohi Gilman was a great player for the Ravens when they got him last year. So I think that's a great, replacement to bring in for Brian Cook. Obviously, they lost him. And then obviously the biggest name they signed, Kenneth Walker. I mean, this was a team that needed a running back, and they got it. They got Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker. There were reports saying, that, he was upset with his usage in Seattle, that, thought he should be used more. Obviously, though, it was the first season that he stayed healthy for the full season because of that split with Zach Charbonnet. But, I think the Chiefs, this is huge for a team that just did not have a run game last year. Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco just were not getting it done. And I think this team is going to greatly benefit now from being able to, run some play action now and also just, hopefully ground and pound against teams that they weren't able to because they did not have that run game. And Travis Kelce, it's we'll see if this is the last year or if we had another one after this. It was a signing that, they had to make. He wasn't going to go anywhere. And, obviously with his mom, Donna Kelce, making a house renovation, he might have to make some more money to help out with that renovation. And what do you think, they could have done different, Christian? I think this is a great offseason, though, for them so far.
and the Chiefs, a big classic Chiefs offseason. Kenneth Walker, I do believe is overpay. It's a running back. But biggest need for the offense. He fits them beautifully with what they want to do. They need to go back to running the ball, more 50-50 split, 60-40. That's when the Chiefs were at their best offensively. Struggled with that. Haven't really found the running back needed the past few years, especially when Pacheco went down last year. It was really rough. Alohi Gilman, very underrated, good safety. Was good on the Ravens last year, was good on the Chargers before that. Big help losing Brian Cook. Kyrus Tonga, very good interior defensive lineman. Big help. And Kaidir Kohu, like you said, did not pan out on the Dolphins, but in a Chiefs system where they make some guys you've never heard of good corners, it could work out. So I give him a solid B. Yeah.
Yeah, and rounding out the AFC West here with the Raiders. The Raiders spent a lot of money. They were the talk of the offseason, obviously, with the Maxx Crosby dilemma. But they bring back Eric Stokes, Malcolm Kuntz, Thomas Booker IV, Jordan Meredith, Will Putman, Charles Snowden, and Tristan McCullum. They bring in Tyler Linderbaum, Kwity Paye, Quay Walker, Nakobe Dean, Jalen Naylor, Connor Hayward, Matt Gay, and Derek Young. And they also made the trade where they gave up a 7th-round pick for Teron Johnson. I mean, this is an A. It's almost like the Steelers where I want to give them an A+, but I think it's not an A+ yet because they still have to address that wide receiver position, I think, a little bit more. But, I mean, you get a guy that's going to come block for Fernando Mendoza and Tyler Linderbaum as one of the, the best, not, one of the best, if not the best center in the NFL. Kwity Paye is a project guy in a sense. He did not pan out in Indianapolis, had an okay rookie season, but really just never picked it up from there. And Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean are reunited. I think this is a team that, you just brought two guys that played great together at Georgia, and hopefully they'll be great together now in Las Vegas. Jalen Naylor, also a bit of an overpay, but you address that wide receiver issue with him a little bit. A guy that's been, overshadowed by obviously Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. This could be his breakout year. And, Clint Kubiak, a very good offensive mind. We saw what he did with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, obviously both playing running back. But I think Connor Hayward is a guy that we're going to see utilized very, surprisingly, compared to his utilization in Pittsburgh, with an offensive mind like Clint Kubiak. So yeah, I'd stick at an A here. Teron Johnson as well really helps out their defense. And, the main thing, they currently have Maxx Crosby. They brought him back. They say he plans to play for the Raiders this season. So if this is the case, I mean, yeah, it's an A. I mean, you kept Maxx Crosby, which is very interesting, and just brought in a lot of help for a team that needed it. What do you think they could have done to get that A+, or, what do you think they need to do heading to the draft?
I believe it's an A as well. Another team that spent a lot of money, mostly because they believed Maxx Crosby wasn't going to be on their team until the situation happened. They got him back. It will make it interesting for the future with all these big contracts, with how the money's going to line up. But they bought Tyler Linderbaum, one of the best centers in football. Major overpay, but one of the best centers in football. You got to go in free agency and pay that if you need that. And they needed a center. They did. So they can move JPJ to guard now. Kwity Paye, like you said, underrated. Should be good with Maxx Crosby on the other side. Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean, teammates at Georgia. It's a match made in heaven for them. Jalen Naylor, very underrated on the Vikings the past few years. Should help them out. Connor Hayward, a good blocking tight end. Trading for Teron Johnson is huge. They needed corner help. They brought back Eric Stokes. They brought back Malcolm Kuntz, which should be good. They still need a little more offensive line help, a little more secondary help, but and receiver help, like you said. So I'll give it an A. Very good offseason so far.
Yeah, and that is it now for the AFC. We're going to be shifting gears to the NFC, and we're going to start here with the NFC East. The Eagles, kind of the same as, some teams that we talked about in the AFC. They have not done a lot. They re-signed Jordan Davis, Brendan Mann, and Grant Calcaterra. They bring in, though, Tariq Woolen, which was a pretty big signing for them, Johnny Munt, Arnold Ebiketie, and Jonathan Jones. I'd give them a B-, and this is purely going to be off of, I am a huge fan of Arnold Ebiketie. I think this is a guy that, in a system like Philly, could blossom. I think this is a guy to watch next year and could be a very good edge rusher and possibly the reason why they did not, throw money at Jalen Phillips, and we'll get into him once we get to the Panthers. Tariq Woolen, you rounded out your DBs now with, at least your corner room, with him, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean. But I'm going to set it that grade just because it wasn't like, a team like the Raiders that we just talked about. But I think it was a pretty good offseason where they addressed their needs and got some guys that could, really come out and have a breakout season this year for them.
Eagles, I'll give it a C+. They lost a lot of guys. Unfortunately, that's what happens. Howie Roseman, very good GM. When you draft well, you're going to lose guys. That's just how it goes. Bringing in Tariq Woolen, this is kind of a prove-it deal for him. Seattle was very willingly let him walk and have Josh Jobs their cornerback too. A lot of issues, at least on the field, taunting-wise. Almost blew them the game against the Rams. Arnold Ebiketie, like you said, very good. They're the reason why they were willing to let Jalen Phillips go, which I thought he would re-sign. But other than that, they didn't really do much. So we'll see. Well, they always draft well, though. So I'm expecting this to rise soon. So C+.
Yeah, and moving on to their biggest competition in the division, the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, franchise tag George Pickens, Brandon Aubrey was brought back, Sam Williams, Josh Butler, Reddy Stewart, and they bring in Jalen Thompson, Kobe Durant, PJ Locke, Otto Agabania, Sam Howell, Tyrus Wheat, and Matt Hennessy. And they also made the splash trade for Rashawn Gary. I'd give them a C just because you're bringing in a lot of guys that, Jalen Thompson, PJ Locke, addressing needs. They need safeties. But a lot of guys that, Jalen Thompson I actually do believe is very underrated and could have a good year for the Cowboys. But, hasn't worked out so well in Arizona. So it's a lot of guys that haven't worked out well in their previous spot. We'll obviously see what happens with George Pickens if he gets re-signed to a large deal or if he will even play under the franchise tag. That will be an interesting situation to watch. But, Rashawn Gary, I think, is a great pickup for them. Essentially they traded Micah Parsons for Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, and 2 first-round picks. I mean, that's pretty solid, my opinion. Obviously, Micah Parsons is way better than Rashawn Gary in the sense of an edge rusher, but I think it's a great replacement, and we'll see if he could kind of, get back to what he was in his first couple years in Green Bay and really be an elite edge rusher for the Dallas Cowboys. So, I'll stick there. And, what do you think about what their offseason has been so far, Christian?
I'll stick with the C plus. I'm giving a lot of C pluses out. I still think that's a good grade. But Rashawn Gary, big need. After losing Micah, they didn't have a lot of edge help last year. But he should help having Quinnen now, obviously on the inside. I believe they're moving to a 3-4 now. They were a 4-3. They're moving to a 3-4 now, so that's why they're moving on from a lot of defensive tackles, bringing in more edge rushers. Safety help: Jalen Thompson, PJ Locke, Kobe Durant's a nickel. Big secondary help. Their secondary's been very bad the past few years, but it's the same thing. They really only brought in Rashawn Gary. The safety help: Jalen Thompson, a little underrated, little not. He's been okay. PJ Locke's been okay. He looked very good on a very good Denver defense. Kobe Durant struggled last year. That's why the Rams wouldn't let him go. C plus for the Cowboys. Not terrible, not great.
Yeah, and to correct myself there, I do realize I said that they brought back Brandon Aubrey. Those contract negotiations are still ongoing. And that would be a shock if they lose him, in my opinion. I do think they will bring him back, I guess. Could be a prediction here. But we'll see what his market is, obviously, with Kaimi Fairbairn, as I mentioned before, being the highest paid kicker now. This is a guy that was their best player, though, essentially last year. So I assume they're going to bring him back. And heading on to the Washington Commanders, they bring back Laramie Tunsil, Marcus Mariota, Andrew Wiley, Nick Allegretti, Trey Way, Trevelyan Burks, Jake Moody, Drake Jackson, Shai Tuttle, Detrich Weiss, Trent Scott, and Chris Paul. They bring in Odafe Owe, Leo Chanel, Tim Settle, Chigoziem Okonkwo, Amik Robinson, Nick Cross, Caleb Chason, Charles Omenihu, Jerome Ford, Diami Brown, and Van Jefferson. I give this team a B+. This is a team that really hit all of their needs just perfectly. Odafe Owe, bit of an overpay, but it's, I feel like a lot of people got overpaid this free agency. They were handing out large contracts, several teams. But you bring in Leo Chanel now to play aside Bobby Wagner. I mean, this is a team that, their defense got solidified, I think, in this offseason. And Chigoziem Okonkwo could be another weapon for Jane Daniels. He's a tight end that showed flashes in Tennessee under his rookie contract, and now heading to a second home for his second one. I think that he'll possibly have a breakout season for them this year. And we'll really see what could happen with them. I think Nick Cross and Caleb Chason are great, as I said, solidifiers of this defense. And what do you think they could have done better or still have to do?
Commanders, solid B+. Very good offseason that I've seen so far. Odafe Owe, big overpay. Edge rushers, it's a premier position. Played very well last year when he was traded to the Chargers. Didn't produce as much as the Ravens if he wanted to. But Leo Chanel, great. I was always a big Leo Chanel fan. So him going there. But Chigo, Amik Robertson, Nick Cross, Caleb, a lot of good players at a lot of key positions. Yeah, they did very well. Bringing back Laramie Tunsil as well, Marcus Mariota, B+.
Moving on to the New York Giants, under new head coach John Harbaugh, they bring back Jermaine Illuminor, Micah McFadden, Zaire Barnes, Evan Neal, which was a shock to a lot of fans and the organization, Chris Manhertz, Gunnar Olszewski, Ryan Miller, Nick Jones, Isaiah Hodgins, Caleb Murphy, Art Green, and Aaron Stinney. They bring in Isaiah Likely, Tremaine Edmonds, Jordan Stout, Greg Newsome, Patrick Ricard, Darius Washington, Calvin Austin, Jason Sanders, Elijah Campbell, Jason Pinnock, and Darnell Mooney. I'd give them an A. It's A- maybe, just because I think they overpaid some of these players, but they address their needs. And, Jordan Stout and, in my opinion, Jason Sanders, two of the biggest needs, kicker and punter, have been horrible for the Giants past couple seasons. I really think, they brought in guys that are familiar with Harbaugh. And I think this is an A minus offseason. They really address their needs and really, I think, could be a team that, could win this division next year. And we'll see how that pans out.
The Giants are gonna solid B plus. They brought in a lot of guys who could start for them. They also brought back Jermaine Illuminor and Micah McFadden. Those guys came back on team friendly deals. Micah McFadden's on a prove it deal, but very good when he did play. And like you said, special teams has been the Giants' weakness, I would say, the past few years. Bringing a guy like Jason Sanders to compete with Ben Sauls, he doesn't have the job. He has to beat out Ben Sauls. Jason Sanders didn't play last year, but bringing in guys like Isaiah Likely, Tremaine Edmonds, Jordan Stout, Greg Newsome, Patrick Ricard, these guys are all key starters. Calvin Austin, Darnell Mooney, these are guys that can play if you immediately help out Jackson Dart. Tremaine Edmonds will be the captain of your defense, bringing back a guy like Jason Pinnock for special teams. They did everything they needed to. Now we'll see what they do in the draft. B plus.
Yeah, and Giants rounding out that division, heading to the NFC North. The Chicago Bears, who had their most successful season in a while last year, bring back Braxton Jones, DeMarco Jackson, Case Keenum, Daniel Hardy, Jalen Jones, and they bring in Kobe Bryant, Devin Bush, Neville Gallimore, Khalif Raymond, Cam Lewis, Jedrick Willis, and Contavious Street. They also trade for Garrett Bradbury after, Drew Dalman with his surprise retirement. I give them a B plus. This is a team that they weren't, so out there and making their signings and so crazy. That's why I don't think it's above a B plus, but they address their needs and bring back essential guys. And, obviously with the cut of Tremaine Edmonds and the trade of DJ Moore, we're going to see hopefully a Luther Burden and Roma Dunze kind of breakout year for both of them. And Devin Bush, comes in and replaces Tremaine Edmonds, and is much younger than him. Yeah, I think this is a solid offseason so far for the Bears, and we'll really see what they do heading towards the draft.
Solid B minus for the Bears here. Bring in Garrett Bradbury immediately once their starting center retired. Garrett Bradbury, a very capable starter for the Bears. Bring back Braxton Jones, play right tackle, solidifying that old line that they need for Caleb Williams. Kobe Bryant, very underrated safety. Seattle did not want to let him go, but the Bears made an offer too tempting for him. Devin Bush, replacing Tremaine Edmonds, should be good. He was good last year. Neville Gallimore, good defensive tackle. Khalif Raymond, good special teamer. They did everything that they at least needed to. Obviously, getting a DJ Moore is huge for them, but it's a new era for them with Colston Loveland, Rome, and Luther Burden. So, yeah, excited for the Bears.
Yeah, and moving on to their rival, the Green Bay Packers, they bring back Sean Ryan, Chris Brooks, Darian Kennard, Brennan Cox Jr., Nick Neiman, Christian Welch, Josh Wiley, and Jonathan Ford. They bring in Javon Hargrave, Benjamin St-Juste, and Sky Moore, and they obviously, as we said before, traded Colby Wooden for Zaire Franklin. I'd say a solid B minus. I think it's a team that, you lost Colby Wooden in the Zaire Franklin deal. You bring in Javon Hargrave. You bring in Benjamin St-Juste, who I think, they've been struggling at corner, could hopefully maybe have a resurgence type year. He really has been kind of up and down each year of his career. But I think they address their needs. They haven't done anything to make a crazy splash. But I think it's a team that they just really got to hope that, losing Jeff Hafley, I think, is the biggest thing that happened in their offseason, just because their defense wasn't great in the clutch. That's obviously what led them to losing in the playoffs. But he is a very good DC, in my opinion, and we'll see, how their defense is now with Jonathan Gannon leading the team. And, what do you think they're going to be doing, heading towards the draft? And how do you think they've done so far?
I'll give them a C plus, C range. Zaire Franklin, he's been kind of a tackle merchant the past few years. Hasn't been the best for Indianapolis as far as coverage goes. Stopping the run, he's been pretty good. Javon Hargrave, another guy who went to Minnesota and kind of fell off a little bit, but I believe he still has a little bit in the tank for them. That's still huge. They don't really have anything since losing Kenny Clark. Benjamin St-Juste, like you said, underrated corner. Should help out. Their corner room was a struggle last year. But another team that didn't do enough for me. We'll see what they could do in the draft.
Yeah, and moving on to the Minnesota Vikings, who, just made the big splash. We're going to talk about the rest of it, but with Kyler Murray coming to the team, they also brought in James Pierre. They did bring back, though, Eric Wilson, Aaron Jones, Tyvier Thomas, Andrew DePaula, the long snapper, who is, in my opinion, a little bit underrated, but obviously long snappers don't get really much love in the NFL. Jalen Redmond, Ivan Pace, Bo Richter, and Xavier Scott. Yeah, I think you got to be excited if you're a Vikings fan. You have an absolute, just amazing offense when it comes to weapons. And now you have a guy that I think could use them. I think Kyler Murray is going to be a huge change here for the Vikings. Obviously, losing Sam Darnold and then seeing him win a Super Bowl was not great for the Vikings, but I think Kyler Murray could hopefully see a bit of a career revival, kind of like Sam Darnold did with the Vikings and now the Seahawks. I'd give them an A. I think, they got what they needed. I don't think this team really needed much besides the quarterback position, and they got the best one in free agency, in my opinion.
I'm going to give them a B minus B. Kyler Murray, huge for them. They needed someone to compete with JJ. I was also a firm believer that they should never got rid of Darnold and they should have let JJ develop under him. But now they're in this situation. Now they bring Kyler in to compete. James Pierre, another guy who hasn't been that great in his career, but wasn't that bad last year. Could help that secondary. They also bring back Aaron Jones, who is probably going to compete for the running back one job this year with Jordan Mason. I don't believe Aaron Jones has enough in the tank to be a workhorse running back anymore. But yeah, a B.
And rounding out the division with the Detroit Lions, a team that really has not done a whole lot so far, but they bring back Malcolm Rodriguez and Tom Kennedy. They bring in Cade Mays, Rock Ya-Sin, Christian Eisen, Tyler Conklin, Teddy Bridgewater, Isaiah Pacheco, and Roger McCreary. They do, obviously we spoke about it with the Texans, make the trade they acquired Juice Scruggs, and they got rid of Dave Montgomery. I'd give them a C+. I don't think it deserves lower than that because it's a team that hasn't done much, so I don't think they deserve lower for that. But I think, bringing Isaiah Pacheco, they immediately addressed the loss of Dave Montgomery. And there's a lot of hate of the move on, social media, but I think it's a great move for them. You addressed losing Dave Montgomery, and I think he's, my opinion, pretty similar to how they use Dave Montgomery. I do think Dave Montgomery is a better running back, but if they're going to use him as they used Montgomery, it's the perfect fit to keep Jahmyr Gibbs healthy and to have that kind of Sonic and Knuckles duo again. And, Isaiah Pacheco saying that he wants to be known as Taz. So we'll see how Sonic and Taz do in Detroit. And so I think it's an offseason, not much happened. And we'll see how they pan out heading into next year.
Yeah, another team didn't do much, but did what they needed to. Isaiah Pacheco, like you said, I very agree. I feel like he'll be very good with Jahmyr Gibbs. Losing David Montgomery's obviously big, but they kind of lost the way they used Sonic and Knuckles, really. I don't know why they strayed away from it, but now they bring in Isaiah Pacheco. Cade Mays, the biggest addition, I believe, for this team. Very good center. Has been very good the past 2 years in Carolina, and the Lions needed a center ever since Ragnow retired. They also re-signed Malcolm Rodriguez. Had a good rookie year. Has been struggling, but knows the system. So, yeah, but they didn't do much, though. So, C+.
Yeah, and head into the NFC South now, a team that did the exact opposite of the Lions. They did a lot, and they bring back, though, David Moore, Robert Rochelle, Akalib Evans, James Mitchell, Trevin Gibson, LeBron Ray, and Isaiah Simmons. And then they spent money on their defense, bringing in Jalen Phillips, Devin Lloyd. They, on the offensive side, bring in Rasheed Walker and Kenny Pickett. And to round out their free agency, they bring in Luke Fortner, John Mechie, and Stone Forst. I give them a B, and purely because of the money. I think they hit everything they needed to get. They got Jalen Phillips to, they replaced Brian Burns. They haven't had a good edge rusher since he left. This is now the best edge rusher that they've had since Brian Burns. However, as we said before, when we said that we believe he was overpaid, I mean, giving that much money to a guy that has not been able to stay healthy and then just had a, better year than he has after being traded from Miami to the Eagles, I think giving that much money just showed how much they wanted him and how much they needed edge rush help. We'll see if that contract, bites them in the end. But Devin Lloyd, that was a great signing. They address linebacker and really get a captain of their defense. I think he's going to be great in Carolina. And Rasheed Walker, someone that is going to go completely under the radar because it's just not a flashy move in free agency getting O-linemen. But I mean, him and Ike Mwenku, you got your protectors now for Bryce Young. Like, it is solidified. 2 guys that could be there for the next 5 to 10 years. Bryce Young really should, have some good protection. Obviously, we said Cade Mays went to the Lions. But, from the outside, you got 2 great tackles. You did lose a little bit there on the interior. But, I think they had a great offseason so far. And, what do you think, Christian, how they did this year?
I agree. I'm agreeing with you. B. Devin Lloyd, huge splash. For the defense, needed a guy at linebacker. Carolina's historically very good at the linebacker position. They've never really had weaknesses there. Rasheed Walker, a guy who's going to come in and play for Icom. Unfortunately, he's injured at the moment. I'm surprised Rasheed Walker didn't get more offers to be a full-time starter somewhere else. But it's a big need, big fill that they need right now. Jalen Phillips, like you said, it is an overpay. They're betting on what he could be. The problem is he can never stay on the field. That's what they're betting on. But it is a B because they addressed everything they needed. Everything they needed, mostly defensively, because that's where they struggled mostly last year with the offense kind of getting better with Bryce Young. But a solid B, yeah.
Yeah, and moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who we saw that was their most competitive team in the division compared to the Panthers. Obviously coming down to the wire for a division winner. They bring back Cade Otton and Sean Tucker. They bring in Alex Anzalone, who I think is going to be huge for them. Obviously, with Levante David getting up there in age, and Kenneth Gainwell and Al Quadin Hamid. I think this is a C type of offseason. Not a lot done. And Al Qadim Muhammad, actually, sorry for mispronouncing it. I think, Kenneth Gainwell, though, is a great addition. Obviously, with Rashad White leaving, it's a guy that fills that role perfectly and, hopefully can help Bucky stay healthy. But yeah, I don't think they did enough to, really keep, talking about him almost. I think, yeah, it's a team that we'll see if, Baker Mayfield could just play better. I think it's going to be Baker Mayfield has the weapons and it's going to be really on him.
Like you said, the team didn't really do much. They did lose Mike Evans, which will be huge. Bring back Cade Otton was huge in that sense, keeping a weapon for Baker. Kenneth Gainwell kind of evolved this year into the pass catching back that he was in college, which he never really showcased on the Eagles much. So I really like that signing. And Muhammad, a underrated guy from the Lions this past year. Surprised they didn't want to bring him back. Big edge help for the Bucks there, but they didn't do enough. So I'll go C for them.
Yeah, and moving on to the Falcons, I'm going to put the Saints in here with them almost just because it's two teams that did not do a lot to talk about them individually, in my opinion, and it rounds out the division here nicely. Falcons bring back Kyle Pitts, and, they bring in Jahan Dotson, Nick Folk, Jake Bailey, and obviously the biggest thing was Tua Tagovailoa and Azeez Ojulari. They bring back Olamide Zaccheaus, but a team that just obviously Tua, we'll see. I think it was a smart signing in a sense. You're going to, obviously with Michael Penix being injured, the team is used to a left-handed quarterback. So I think that was smart in that sense, but it's a guy that just, has not been able to get it done. I think maybe he will benefit from playing in a division in, warm weather and, with two domes in it. But besides that, I just don't think they had such a great offseason. I would give them a C+. I think we'll see how they end up faring. And then the Saints, they bring back John Ridgeway. They bring in David Edwards, Travis Etienne, Caden Ellis, Ryan Wright, and Noah Fant. They had I'd say a B+ offseason. They bring in David Edwards, who, this is one of the best O-lines in football now, in my opinion. They have two great tackles. They have the center, and now you bring in David Edwards, with Cesar Ruiz. I think this is just a great guard duo, and I think it's a very good O-line now. For their running back now, Travis Etienne, to run behind. They struggled with that last year with Kamara. I think Audric Estime got rushes for that team. Just Kendre Miller wasn't a great option. That is huge for them, and I think that is really going to help Tyler Shough out in his second year. And Caden Ellis, a guy who's been, in my opinion, overlooked his entire career. Demario Davis heading elsewhere is going to be that guy with, Danny Stutzman on that team as well and Jalen Ford. But we'll see how, that linebacking core fares. And I think, for them, it's, solid offseason. And, what do you think both these teams, could have done different, though, to, be talked about more almost, that they just, really, I think, Tua was the biggest thing for the Falcons.
Yes, the biggest splash for the Falcons was Tua. Bringing a lefty for them was good because they already had a lefty system with Michael Penix. So bringing someone in like Tua, he should be able to learn it very, very quickly. Other than that, they only brought in like rotational guys. Really, the Falcons didn't really do much. They retained Kyle Pitts, which is huge for them. Brought in Nick Folk at kicker. Other than that, bunch of rotation guys. With Tua, I'll give him a C. The Saints, David Edwards, he's a good guard. He's a good guard for the Bills. Kind of a resurgence after starting out his career very slowly. Like you said, they have one of the best O-lines in football now. Travis Etienne, a lot of money given to a running back, which they kind of needed to hand the reins over to someone else. He is it's a lot of money, but Kamara's kind of falling off. Devin Neal didn't do enough last year. Kaden Ellis, full resurgence coming back to New Orleans after being drafted here. Should be big help. And the Saints, I'll give them a C plus.
And now heading to the final division we're going to talk about here, the NFC West, and starting with the Super Bowl champions, the Seattle Seahawks. They bring back Rashid Shaheed, Josh Jobe, Drake Thomas, Jake Bobo, Chris Stoll, Brady Russell, Josh Jones, George Halani, Ty Okada, and AJ Finley. And they have not brought anybody in or even traded for anybody. This is a team that, they have a lot of cap right now, but they know they're going to have to re-sign guys like Devon Witherspoon. Zach Charbonnet, if that's who they're going with, they will have to give him a contract in the future. JSN's contract is obviously going to be coming up. I'd give them a B. They lost a lot, obviously, in Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, but Boye Mafe. But I think this is a team that, they have the coaching staff still. I think, they have good assistants there that will take over, for, the loss of Clint Kubiak on the offensive side of the ball. But I really do believe that the Seahawks will, be back as a major contender next year.
I agree. They didn't have to do anything. The reigning champions, Rashid Shaheed, major, they wanted him back. Major on special teams. Should be even bigger on the offense this year. Josh Jobe started his career with the Eagles. Came to Seattle, found a home. Didn't outplay Tariq Woolen last year, but played well enough to warrant them not having to pay Tariq Woolen. Drake Thomas, big defender for them. Homegrown guy. They love him there. Jake Bobo, one of the best blocking receivers in football. I'm giving them a B. They didn't have to do anything. Their team's good as it is. We'll see what they do in the draft.
Yeah, and heading to what has now become, I think, the biggest rivalry in this division because of how many times, and they played each other last year 3 times than typical 2, and how good those games were. The Los Angeles Rams bring back Cam Curl and Tyler Higbee. They bring in Jalen Watson, Grant Stewart, and Joe Cardona, and obviously they made the big splash, giving up a first-round pick and some late-day picks for Trent McDuffie. I think this is an A-plus offseason. I think this is the first team I'll give an A-plus. They did not have to do much, almost like Seattle. They were the team that were almost in the Super Bowl, and many would probably say would have won that Super Bowl as the Patriots did not look great in it. I think you're going off, Matthew Stafford winning MVP, could be his last year potentially. You went in and said, let's go win this thing. You got a great corner in Trent McDuffie. As we did say it was, an overpay in the sense of giving a slot corner that much money, but as I just said, you're going for it all essentially this season. You're going to get Matt Stafford that second ring and really show that trade, already that trade will go down as a great trade for them because they got the 1 ring already, but you're really looking to capitalize on Matt Stafford's potential last season here. So I think this is the first team I will give that A+ to because I think, they're going for it all and they did it in the right way.
I agree. I'm giving them an A here. Their secondary got very exposed last year, specifically by the Seahawks. Bringing in a guy like Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, big needs. Bringing back Cam Curl, their secondary. I believe this team's don't be surprised if this team goes quarterback in the draft. Matthew Stafford, like you said, MVP last year, but he's running on father time right now. I don't know how much more he has left, and like you said, trade was successful with the Lions. They're trying to get more out of it, though. They're winning now. So, very good. A.
Yeah, and heading over to the San Francisco 49ers, who I wouldn't say had a disappointing year. They were very injured last year, but a year that I think fans expected a little bit more out of. They bring back Eddie Pinheiro, Jake Tonjes, Garrett Wallow, Sam Okayano, Patrick Taylor, Luke Gifford, and they bring in the biggest signing of the offseason for them, Mike Evans. And, Nate Hobbs along with him, Corliss Waitman, and Vader Lowe. They also did make the trade for Osa Odowigu from the Dallas Cowboys. They gave up a 3rd-round pick, but I think they addressed the need that they really needed to at D-tackle. I'd give them a B. Honestly, even maybe a B- because Mike Evans was a bit overpaid. But they are addressing an issue that they really needed to. Obviously, Ricky Pearsall, not the receiver that they thought he would be by now. And, same thing with Juwan Jennings, was good, but just not a wide receiver number 1. I think Mike Evans is really going to help out Brock Purdy there now. And I think just the contract, though, was a bit much. That's why I lowered the grade. But, a team that, if they can stay healthy, which is, obviously, we all know the conspiracy theories about that electrical substation. If they could stay healthy, a team that can make a run at it again. And we'll see what they do this year. And, yeah, what do you think about the Niners? Obviously a strong division, and they're going to be looking to win it this year.
I'm giving him a B plus. Brock Purdy now officially gets his wide receiver one, Mike Evans. He had Brandon Ayuk for a little bit. That whole situation kind of panned out. He had Deebo Samuel, wasn't as good as the Niners want him to be. Mike Evans gives them that vertical threat now. They give him a Ricky Pearsall. Offense should be much better now. Getting Osa from the Cowboys, big need in the middle for their defense, and they should be a lot better. They should be a lot healthier this year. So give them the B, yeah.
And ending our analysis here of each team's free agent moves. And I know it has been a longer episode than usual. So if you're still here with us, we thank you for listening to our takes and hope that you agree or disagree. We look forward to seeing what you guys think. Please comment on the podcast, what you think teams could have done differently or what you think about what we said, about your favorite team. The Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, losing Kyler Murray, the big story of the offseason. Bring back Blake Gilkin, LJ Collier, Jonah Williams, Bam Knight, and Chad Ryland. They bring in Isaac Samalu, Tyler Algier, Roy Lopez, Kendrick Bourne, Gardner Minshew, Andrew Wingard, Elijah Wilkinson, Matt Pryor, and Casey Kreider. I'm going to give them a B+, because it's a team that is moving on. Almost, as we said with the Dolphins here. It's a very similar situation. And they bring in a guy like Isaac Samalu, who, hasn't been able to stay healthy the past 2 seasons with the Steelers, but is a great guard when healthy. Tyler Algier, I think, will be a great guy to, play alongside James Conner. Obviously, is staying with the Cardinals, which was a, thing that we did not really know about until we headed into free agency. So I think Tyler Algier, though, will be a guy that could hopefully keep James Conner healthy and just also, bring that kind of, power back explosiveness to Arizona. And, Gardner Minshew is going to be competing with Jacoby Brissett for that starting job, I think, in training camp. It's a team that, we're really going to just have to see what happens. You moved on from your franchise guy. This could be a throwaway year for them. I do not see them above third in this division. But I think they did well in the offseason, though, at least, and have a bright outlook in the future, potentially, for a franchise quarterback in the 2027 draft, potentially. And what do you think about this last team here, Christian?
I agree. It's a team that's moving on from their starting quarterback, Kyler. Didn't work out the way they wanted it to. Going into a new era now. Bringing a guy like Tyler Algier could fight for the running back 1 spot there. Isaac Seumalo, good guard. I'm going to give them a B-. It was a good enough offseason for... They didn't have to make any splashes. They're going into a new era. They don't need to make any big moves yet. They can make moves down the line when they get a quarterback. But, yeah, solid way to end it off.
Yeah, and that is going to be it for this episode of the podcast. We thank you for sticking around for this a little bit longer episode than usual. And, we will see how these moves shake out in the upcoming NFL season. And obviously, Christian left you with the last spitball last episode, so I'm going to give you one last spitball today. In my opinion, I think the Steelers will win the AFC North again if Aaron Rodgers returns. I think they've had great offseason moves to make their team better. And with Mike McCarthy at the helm, we're going to see an offense that looks completely different than it has under Arthur Smith. So I think we will see what happens with them next year. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of SpitBallin. You can find us anywhere where you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And remember, everybody, keep spitballing.